Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Anna Robinson, and I am the West Virginia Program Manager and Communications Coordinator for the One America Movement. Thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Candid Conversations. Candid Conversations is a part of our new Corona Rebuild initiative, where we connect the challenges of COVID-19, the divisions in our country, and the roles we each have to play in order to move forward together. Every Friday, we'll feature someone from the One America Movement Network on our show to get candid about how the coronavirus pandemic and the division that has come along with it has affected folks in communities across the United States. We've been covering issues related to race, food insecurity, health disparities, mental health, and the conversation is still ongoing. Joining us today is our California Leadership Development Fellow, Lydia Fujimura. Lydia serves as a partner to the One America Movement in areas related to volunteer leadership development, chapter engagement strategy, and California-based program outreach. She also works in human resources as her day job, so she's a super busy woman. So I'm really grateful that you're here with us today. Lydia holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in psychology and a Master's in organizational psychology. And her involvement with the One America Movement began in 2017 after traveling to Israel and Palestine with the Telos Group on a peace-building trip with her church. Welcome, Lydia. We are so excited to have you today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Of course, no problem. Interestingly enough, that Israel-Palestine trip is what we're here to discuss today. So before we get started, for people who don't know, there's been a really serious conflict between Israel and Palestine that began after the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Following the war, there were some changes in Holy Land territory that caused some dissension. If you would like to read more about this conflict, you can visit the Council on Foreign Relations. Their website is www.cfr.org, and I will put that up here so you guys can see that. So if you want to learn more, visit that website there. But now that you guys have some background, Lydia, why don't you tell us a little bit about your trip? How did it happen?
Yeah, definitely. So I am a part of a church out here in California, and in 2017, the church that I'm a part of decided to go on a peace-building tour to Israel and Palestine. And I actually didn't know much about peace building or Israel and Palestine or the Middle East before I went. And that's kind of what sparked my interest in going in the first place. Was, it was a great opportunity to build leadership skills and learn about something that I didn't know about, and, be uncomfortable and just kind of learn what it takes to be a peace builder. So, yeah, it was an awesome opportunity. And, the way the trip is built is it's really centered around building relationships. So it's all about, not your typical Holy Land trip. And it's all about really understanding political leaders, cultural leaders, religious leaders, community leaders on the ground in Israel and Palestine, and getting to know people from both sides of the conflict to have a pro approach. So pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, pro-peace.
That's really interesting. And given how difficult that conflict has been, how difficult was that to have pro both sides and bring those sides together?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was really, really hard. And a lot of people refer to the trip as kind of like the emotional whiplash tour, because you're going from one side of a conflict all the way to another side of a conflict. And on top of that, you're building relationship, like you're building genuine relationship with people that you're meeting, the group that you're with on the trip. And it's exhausting, but it was the best possible way to get a true picture of what, justice and peace building really means in action. And oftentimes when we're called to justice, we're not called to a comfortable or easy life. So it was just an incredible experience that changed my life and changed my perspective on what it means to be a peace builder and what justice means in my life.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting. Do you have any stories? Like, how did you guys go about this? Because I know that it was difficult and it takes, a special effort to do this type of work. So do you have any stories?
Yeah. I have so many stories. But off the top of my head, the Tellus group, and we'll link them below later, but the Tellus group does an incredible job curating experiences and leaders to introduce you to on this trip. We would logistically, you're traveling quite a bit across the land there. So it's a lot of bus rides and time to process in the bus. But we were able to meet, people from all the way from like a formal Israeli general to Palestinian refugees, to folks in Israeli settlements, to people on all parts of the divide. So I think one of the stories that really, really impacted me is the story of the Parent Circle. So the Parent Circle is an organization that Telos is partnered with, and they have parents from both sides of the conflict come together. So it's Israeli parents and Palestinian parents. And all of these parents have lost children to the conflict in some way, shape, or form. So the Israeli parents have lost their children through Israeli-Palestinian violence, and the Palestinian parents have lost their children through Israeli-Palestinian violence. So the beautiful part of this group is that, they find peace within each other and have chosen to, live their justice out through relationship with one another. And, going into this trip, like my I guess like baseline for injustice, like I was trying to think of like, because I come from privilege and, haven't had to experience many injustices in my personal life. And so I was trying to get into the emotional state of like, how can I have empathy and relate and really understand what people are going through? And the first thing I thought of was my niece and nephew. Like, if anyone ever did anything to my niece and nephew, like, I honestly don't know if I could forgive them, And so having that perspective, we can theoretically talk about forgiveness and reconciliation, but if it happened to me, like, I don't know how I would react. And really hearing these people's stories about the true reconciliation between these parents really brought that to life for me. And then, sorry, go ahead. Did you have a thought?
No, I was just going to say the forgiveness part. Forgiveness is such a difficult thing to master.
Yeah.
And I know, I think in a situation like this, the forgiveness has to be more for yourself than for the other person. Because when you hold on to that hate, it's just something that will eat away at you, And I also think with that, it's easy to look at a group and if they're not part of your group and blame everybody in the group for the actions of a few instead of getting to know the person for who they are. So that I was just going to say that is 100% a difficult thing. And I really respect the fact that you try to put yourself in their shoes in whatever way that you could. I mean, obviously you haven't experienced what they have experienced, but you made an attempt to try to understand. And I don't think a lot of people do things like that. So I just wanted to say that I really appreciate your empathy.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, and that's why trips like this are so important. It's like, I never could have gotten to that place on my own. And that's why storytelling is important and the art of listening is important, because, if we're stuck in our own realities, like, there's no way that we can bridge those divides and build relationship to really understand what it takes, like what it actually takes to have justice in your life. So that was like an incredible opportunity to learn from those parents. And then we also met a Palestinian Christian man named Daoud, who has a farm in Israel and Palestine, and his land is in a very desirable location. And as people might know, amidst the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, land is, a huge portion of that conflict. And so he's been through immense just trials trying to keep this land that's been owned by his family for many, many years. And he told us this story of the Israeli soldier that was there to kind of like guard the land and, approach him when he was coming home. And it was a really beautiful depiction of like just the realities that, the Israeli side has with the generational trauma from the Holocaust. And, a lot of these soldiers are 18-year-old kids. So, all of the side effects that come along with that and bearing that generational trauma. And then putting people in a situation of conflict where it's like fundamentally one against the other, about land and safety and all of that. And you just told us the story about how he was driving with his kids and, he saw the soldier and he was like, okay, like his kids were asleep in the back and he was like, I'm going to stay calm and just, try to approach this as diffused as possible. And long story short, he basically wound up having a moment with this soldier because, they both kind of realized the humanness in one another rather than their roles, as Palestinian versus Israeli soldier. And they just had a moment together, and it was just an incredible example of, how those little moments, like, there's so much more to Daoud's story than just that, and I'm not doing it justice in any way. But those little moments of finding the humanity in each other when we have our differences, and to your point, like not putting all of the weight of a conflict on one individual and being able to see them as human, is incredible and just really, really inspiring.
Definitely. This trip to me, it sounds like it was so profound and so life-changing. And I'm really glad that you were able to experience that. But I was wondering if you could tell me, since you've come back and you've had a chance to reflect on what you've seen, what you learned, what you experienced, how did this trip change your life? Has it changed the way that you thought about things since coming back? How has that affected you?
Yeah. So it has changed my life in every single way. I really feel like from the moment I went for the first time in 2017, I have just had an incredibly different perspective of my relationships, my vocation, just how I want to approach my life as a whole. And I actually wound up going back 2 times after the first trip because I was just so like enthralled with what's going on over there. And I just really wanted to learn, of course, the history and culture with Israel and Palestine, but I was also very inspired to bring these principles, these peacemaking principles, to my daily life and to the church that I was a part of. And, just there's so much that we can learn from people who have gone through this and from the stories that, they've been able to share. And it just really inspired me to approach my work differently and approach my friendships and make sure that I have completely different perspectives in my life and continuously challenge myself to go deeper and be uncomfortable. And it's hard. It's like, sometimes when we come back from experiences like that, the first place we need to go from a peacemaking perspective is the closest to us. So that might be our families, the dinner table. Those are where like the biggest conflicts come up a lot of time. And those are the ones that, personally would be easier to avoid. And oftentimes like with those, that's how we change the world, like we start with our group, our people. And, it just kind of spiraled from there. And then I got connected to the One America movement. And One America really inspired me because after having these overseas experiences, I knew that I needed a tangible way to like apply this to my current surroundings and the division that exists in America, because it's very apparent. And One America is, building bridges exactly around, these peace building principles. And it just really, really inspired me to be able to not let the work stop, overseas, and really bring it into my life and make it a way of life and a practice.
That's awesome. And I'm glad that we have you on board, because you do offer a unique perspective. Because I think for a lot of people, we look at other countries and we're like, that could never happen here. That's something that would never happen. And we're seeing our country become more and more divided with each passing day. And I think the reality is we'd love to believe that all these things are impossible here, but they're not. And so I think someone like you who has this experience where you've seen these two groups who are just have been at each other's throat for years, and the fact that you have gone to work with them, and you've actually seen people, and this conflict, it's deep. It's a deep conflict.
Yeah.
You've seen them come together. That's amazing. And I'm glad that you're here now, so that we can apply those same principles to the work that we do with the One America movement. With that said, and this is going to be a tough question,
Okay.
but how do you think, given all of your experience and everything that you've witnessed, and the progress that you've seen with the peace building work that you've done in Israel and Palestine, how do you think we can do better in the United States? How do you think we can build those relationships and bridge divides with people across, different religions, races, political backgrounds, to avoid serious conflicts like that, to move forward as a nation?
Oh boy. Yeah, wow. I definitely don't have a succinct answer for that one.
Yeah.
But I think, it's in the day to day. It's in like the little things that we might think don't matter. It's in, like I was saying, like the relationships we have with the people in our circle. Like, nobody has your access. Like, every single person has their own unique access to people. So like, I don't know your parents well at all, and like, you have a unique way to influence them, and their values, and in topics like where America's discussing right now, like, those are such important conversations to have with the people that we have access to. And so I think that's number one for me, is just like the day-to-day responsibility that I have to the people in my circle, to just start those conversations and like be courageous and risk being uncomfortable and have the hard conversations. And then it's also just kind of like taking the initiative to go beyond that too. So like, have the foundation of our own groups, and then diversify our experiences. So taking a trip, or learning a new trade, or going to a different community than you would normally go to, and just kind of like expanding our own perspectives and recognizing our, the privileges that we might each hold, and the biases, the unconscious biases that we might have, and really doing that personal work to be ready to kind of embrace like the rest of our communities. But that's way easier said than done.
Yeah.
And it takes forever. So in it for the long haul.
Definitely.
I was actually going to ask as a follow-up, because I agree with you. I think we do have to, diversify our relationships. We need to have those difficult conversations. We need to be, as you and I know, in-group moderates. So people need to stand up and speak out against something that we know is wrong within our own groups. But you're right, it is easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could give anyone advice on how to take that first step, what would that be?
Ooh, that's good. I would probably say, this is something that Telos talks about, is learning to listen. That's one of the biggest things that I think is the root of a lot of conflict and the root of a lot of misinterpretation of in-group, out-group perspectives. We don't know how to listen to each other, so, and I struggle with that all the time. Like, I have to check myself, even after like tangibly having like worksheets from Telos, like how to listen to others. It's hard, so it's like you can have the tools, you can have the experiences, but it's a daily choice to selflessly like surrender your own perspective for the sake of someone else's. And so I think I would just start with like learning to listen and asking yourself the hard questions, like, where do I have biases? How can I seek to understand rather than prove my own point? And just starting with our own people with that too.
I think that's really excellent advice. And I think that's learning to listen. It can be difficult for some, but I think that's an easy place to start for sure. You've mentioned Telos a couple of times throughout this conversation, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to tell the folks who are watching what Telos is, maybe how you got in contact with them. I know you did work through your church, but what is it? How can people learn more about it? Do you have any additional information?
Yeah, for sure. So Telos's perspective is really just forming communities of peacemakers to like equip them, to help them reconcile, conflicts that are seemingly intractable, and just kind of give people the tools to start that work, including listening and telling your story. And all of that is relevant abroad, but also at home. So definitely check out their website, the telosgroup.org. And, they have tons and tons of resources there. So it's not simply going all the way to Israel and Palestine, and we can't really do that right now. But, there's tons of books, there's tons of articles. This How to Tell Your Story guide is on there too. So definitely check them out, read the resources, and
All right, awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. We are running out of time, but I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us today and telling your story. I think it's amazing, and I think you're amazing, and all the work that you do is wonderful. So thank you so much.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we head out, though, I do want to remind all of you guys to check out our website, www.oneamericamovement.org, our Facebook page at One America Movement, and our Twitter at @one__America. We do have a Corona Rebuild initiative that we want you guys to check out. If you want to learn more about that, please visit coronarebuild.org. You can also navigate to that page if you are on our website as well. Other than that, make sure you guys tune in next week for another episode of Candid Conversations. We're going to have two of our board members on, Leslie Copeland-Toon and Matt Hawkins. They wrote a blog together about racism from the Christian perspective, so it's going to be really awesome. Make sure you tune in. Until then, I hope you guys enjoy your weekend, and thanks for watching.
Bye.